Welcome to Chapter 2. We are going to be looking at the cell. Oh, if you remember from last class, atoms make up everything. I believe I gave you the definition. They are the smallest unique unit. And they make molecules and macromolecules. And molecules and macromolecules are groups of atoms with specific properties. This is important because molecules make up cells. Cells are put together, lipids, proteins, carbohydrates, nucleic acids. They need vitamins to function right. They need water, which is a molecule. And cells are important because they give rise to tissues, and the tissues make our organs. So to understand how our organs work, we're going to need to look at the tissues. To understand the tissues, we actually have to go back and look at cells and what cells have. The cells are the foundation of life. And you are going to explain to me the importance of cells in the human body, why we need them, and relate the function of cells to their tissue. Now, this is going to be towards the end of our lecture that I talk about their functions, and list the general functions of cells as well. So, why do we have to learn about the cell? That's microbiology in Bio 130. Well, all organisms are made of cells and cell products. Your bones, it's calcium and a collagen fiber. That is a product of cells called osteoblasts. And cells are the simplest structural and functional unit of life. And how an organ works depends on the cells inside and what they're capable of. So the function of tissues and organs is due to the functioning of these cells. That is why we have to look at these cells. Now, we have 75 trillion cells according to a textbook. Do not memorize that, okay? We just have a lot. And cells are organized into 4 categories of tissues. So, what the heck are tissues here? What the heck do our tissues do? Well, that's a muscle. And muscle tissue is made up of muscle cells. What does that do? It moves. We have nervous tissue. And nervous tissue is made up... Where is nervous tissue? That's right, your brain. And it sends and receives signals. Now, there's a bunch of protein fibers and fibroblasts. There's a type of tissue called connective. Low-hanging fruit, what do you think connective tissue does? That's right, it connects. And then we have a lining out here. And this lining is called epithelial. Remember, epi equals on top. So let us look at some of the functions of cells in our body. Why the heck are we studying cells? Well, first, they cover the body. That's your skin. It protects us. And that's made up of this epithelial tissue. Remember, epi is on top of. And it's also lining tubes. Some of it absorbs nutrients, like in your intestines. Some of it secretes sweat. Or you see a chocolate cake and smell fresh baked bread. What are you going to do? You're going to salivate. That is secretion. And it forms barriers. So cells form tissues that form barriers. And notice, I am coloring the words that I care about. So cells protect, absorb, secrete, form barriers. They store things. So storage, apparently my colors didn't save. So we're not going to worry about what they're storing right now. So just some examples. Adipose cells, they store fat. I have way too many of those. And muscle cells and liver cells store glucose. We really don't care about that right now. We care that they store nutrients. Now notice, I didn't put bone and calcium. Bone stores calcium, but it's not the bone cells. Movement, guess what kind of cells that is? That's right, muscle cells. And it connects and supports the body. Which of our 4 cells would that be? Epithelial, nervous, muscle, or connective? That's right, connective. And it protects the body. White blood cells. They fight off infection. Well, what kind of tissue would that make? I don't know. Epithelial cells. Your skin is a protective boundary. It keeps bad guys out and your insides in. Bone, your skull, it protects you. What kind of tissue would bone be, do you think? It connects things, so it must be connective. Communication, that's our nervous cell. There's our multipolar neuron right there. It has lots of these processes to receive information. It has a big nucleus, our cyclops, and then a process to send information. And of course, reproduction. And that means a sperm and an egg can make an offspring, or you have stem cells all over. So we're going to talk about the specific types of cells later at the end of today's lecture. So we're not going to worry about that right now. We're going to look at the parts of the cell. And you'll be able to identify the three regions. You're going to be able to identify what is in each region and why it needs to be compartmentalized. Why can't we have things mixing? And can you draw a detailed picture of the cell membrane? Here's a cell. It is surrounded by the cell membrane. The cell membrane is to act as a barrier, and it lets the cell communicate, and it transfers things in and out. So we'll look at the structure of that later. Now in the center of the cell, we have a nucleus. This has deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA for short. This codes for any protein the human body is capable of making. Sometimes the protein will never ever be made, but it's coding for it nonetheless. And nucleuses usually have this darkened region called a nucleolus, and that makes structures called ribosomes. And we'll talk about what a ribosome is later on. And then we have the fluid-filled portion here. That's the cytoplasm, where things take place, like linking a cell to a factory. The nucleus has the instructions. It tells stuff in the cytoplasm what to do. So human cells and animal cells have three basic regions. They have the plasma membrane, which controls entry and exit into the cell. It has a cytoplasm, which contains organelles. Organelles are little factories. There's the energy plant right there. There is the manufacturing line right there. There's the packaging center right there. So the cytoplasm is where all it happens. Well, you need the factory floor to be told what to do. You have the nucleus. That contains the genetic information. It tells the stuff in the cytoplasm what to do. Now, the cell membrane is made up of lipids and proteins. I'm going to take a little section of cell membrane right here, and I'm going to blow it up very big. I'm going to see a lot of these things that look like two-headed sperm called phospholipids. Phospholipids have two regions. They have a lipid region. That's the tails on what looks like the two-headed sperm. And this lipid region hates water. Guess what? You are 60 to 70% water. So that makes a great barrier. Now, phosphate groups like being charged. And I'm just going to put a little plus there to show that it's charged. Now, this is two pairs of phospholipids. This little section here is actually made up of two rows of phospholipids. This row here is facing my intracellular space. And this is mainly water and ions, glucose too. Now, ions and glucose and water all have a charge. Ions have a full charge, glucose and water have a partial charge. You don't need to worry about that. Now, lipids don't like this, so they're sort of pushing that stuff to stay inside. Now, the second row is facing out. This is the outside here. We'll call it ECF, for extracellular fluid. And we have water here too. We have different ions. And we have other molecules as well. Now, they can't go through either because they don't like these lipids. So the phospholipid membrane, or bilayer, basically keeps the inside in and the outside out. It forms a barrier, so this is a barrier. Now the problem is I'm going to want to let stuff in. So there's also proteins. There could be proteins that go all the way through, or proteins that are just on one side. Your cell membrane is made up of two kinds of molecules, proteins and phospholipids. So again, atoms make molecules, molecules make cellular structures. Now the job of the membrane is to be a barrier and to regulate what can go in or out. In diabetes, what's the problem? There's lots of sugar in the blood. Why is there lots of sugar? Well, one of these proteins needs a key called insulin to let glucose into the cell. See, glucose is supposed to be in the cell, not out of the cell. So in diabetes, that key doesn't work, or this protein doesn't work, so insulin can't come in. Now, I want to say one more thing. This part loves water. It's got to be hydrophilic, water-loving, where this part hates water, so it's hydrophobic. The hydrophobic region makes it a barrier to keep the insides in and the outsides out. A better picture of our cell membrane. We have our phospholipids here, and they do look like two-tailed sperm. And that forms a barrier. Now, controlling what enters and leaves, that's the job of these proteins. Oh, look! That protein goes all the way through, and there's a channel. Oh, that protein goes all the way through, but it's not a channel. And it lets the cells communicate with the outside world. Now, the lipid component. I care about the three kinds of lipids and which is the most common, which is the least. Here is our two-tailed sperm. Here are the tails, and those are made of a lipid, so they are hydrophobic. The head is a charged phosphate molecule, so it likes water, and we have the heads facing the extracellular space, and we have the heads facing the intracellular space. And these phospholipids make up about 75% of the cell membrane. Their job, keep the outside out, inside in. Now, there's another molecule called cholesterol. This is a cholesterol molecule. Again, you'll never have to draw a molecule for me in this class. And that's about 20% of the lipids, so this is the second most common type. It helps the cell membrane stay rigid. If you only had phospholipids like this, the cell membrane would spontaneously disrupt itself and reform. Well, that's sort of like a prison where the walls disappear and then reappear. It's not going to keep people in prison for very long. The second the walls disappear, they step out. So cholesterol keeps it rigid, keeps it from falling apart. And then glycolipids. The ABO blood type is actually on a glycolipid. That is 5%. It's the least common one. It helps identify the cells. So people with blood type A have one kind of glycolipid. People that have blood type B have another kind of glycolipid. People with blood type AB couldn't make up their mind, so they have both types, and so forth. Now, don't memorize the percents. Know the most common are phospholipids and what the functions are. So we will stop right there. We'll talk about proteins in the cell membrane in our next video.